The year is somewhere around 55 AD. A man sits in a room in Macedonia, modern-day northern Greece. And he is writing a letter. He has been writing letters for years. He has written to churches in Galatia and Thessalonica and Philippi. He has written to Rome. But this letter, this one, is different. This one is personal in a way the others are not, because this letter is to people who know him, people who have seen his face. People who have also, some of them, decided that his face is not impressive enough, that his body is too weak, that his speeches are not polished enough, that whatever he claims to carry, this gospel, this calling, this God, surely a man who looks like Paul cannot be carrying something as powerful as all that. And Paul is tired. Not just the tiredness of travel, though that is real enough. He has walked thousands of miles on Roman roads. He has been beaten with rods 3 times, shipwrecked 3 times, stoned and left for dead in a city called Lystra. He has spent nights in open water, clinging to wreckage, staring at a sky with no answer in it. But there is something else, something he has carried longer than the scars, something he cannot name in the letter. And scholars have argued about it for 20 centuries. He calls it a thorn. He calls it a messenger of Satan. He calls it something given to him, pressed into him, to keep him from becoming proud after an experience so extraordinary he could not speak of it for 14 years. He had been caught up to the 3rd heaven. He had heard things no human language contains, and when he came back down, the thorn was there, waiting. He prayed about it. 3 times, he says. 3 times he brought this thing before God and asked for it to be removed, and God answered him. What God said? 2 sentences, 22 words in English. Has been written on hospital walls and funeral programs and the margins of journals kept by people at the absolute end of themselves. You have probably heard it. You may have it memorized. But there is one word inside it, one Greek word that your English Bible translates as sufficient. And that translation is not wrong. But it is incomplete in a way that changes everything. We will get to that word. But first, we need to understand the man. And we need to understand the thorn. Because this is not a message about positive thinking. This is not a message about enduring hardship with a smile. This is not even a message about grace. This is a message about a man who asked God to fix him 3 times, and what God said instead. To understand what God said to Paul, you have to understand what Paul had already been through before the thorn ever showed up. In the 11th chapter of 2 Corinthians, Paul does something unusual. He makes a list. He is not the kind of writer who makes lists. He is a theologian, a poet, a man who writes sentences that spiral upward like cathedral arches. But here he makes a list, and it is not a list of his achievements. 5 times, he writes, he received 39 lashes from Jewish authorities. 39 lashes. The 40th was considered potentially fatal, so they stopped at 39, which means Paul received 195 lashes across his back in 5 separate sessions, each one deliberate, each one counted. 3 times he was beaten with rods by Roman officials. Once he was stoned. Not stoned in the casual sense. Stoned as in, a crowd picked up rocks and threw them at him until they believed he was dead. And then they dragged his body outside the city walls of Lystra and left it there. His friends gathered around what they thought was a corpse. And then Paul stood up and walked back into the city. The next day, he left for the next town to keep preaching. 3 times he was shipwrecked. Once he spent a night and a day in open water. He lists dangers from rivers, dangers from bandits, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers from false brothers. He lists sleepless nights, hunger, thirst, cold exposure. And then, after all of that, he says, there is also this thorn. Here's what most people miss. The Greek word Paul uses, not the word for a small thorn on a rose bush. The word is skolops. And skolops, in the Greek world, did not mean an irritating splinter. It meant a sharpened stake, a spike. The kind of stake that soldiers drove into the ground around military camps as a defensive barrier. The kind of stake that, in the cruelest applications of ancient warfare, was used for impalement. This was not a splinter in Paul's thumb. This was something that had been driven through him. And he cannot tell us what it was. Scholars have argued about it for 20 centuries. Some say it was a chronic eye disease. He writes to the Galatians that they would have torn out their own eyes and given them to him if they could, and he closes that same letter in large handwriting as if he cannot see well. Some say it was epilepsy. Some say it was the ongoing spiritual warfare of carrying a mission that drew demonic resistance wherever he went. Some say it was a person, a persistent opponent who followed him from city to city. We do not know, and that is not an accident, because Paul's thorn has survived 2,000 years, precisely because it has no name. You fill in the blank. Your thorn goes in that space. The chronic illness that has not responded to prayer, the relationship that has not been restored, the addiction that came back, the depression that lifted and then returned, the dream that died quietly while you were looking the other way. Whatever impales you, that is what goes in the space where Paul's thorn sits. And he prayed about it. 3 times, he says. 3 times he brought this thing before God and asked for it to be taken away. Pay attention to this, because the number 3 is not casual in Paul's writing. Paul knows his scriptures. He knows that Jesus prayed 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knows that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. He knows that 3 in the Hebrew imagination carries the weight of completeness, of finality. Paul is not telling you he prayed casually on 3 separate occasions. He is telling you that he brought everything he had before God, repeatedly, with full intention, and made his case. He pleaded, the text says. The Greek word is perikalesa, the same root as parakletos, the word Jesus uses for the Holy Spirit. The Comforter, the Advocate. Paul was advocating for himself before God with everything he had, and God was quiet. If you've ever been in that silence, you know what it costs. You know the particular kind of doubt that grows in that quiet. Not the intellectual doubt of a philosophy lecture, the visceral doubt that rises at 2 a.m. when you have prayed the same prayer for the 100th time and the ceiling has not moved, and the situation has not changed, and you begin to wonder, in a way you would never say out loud, whether anyone is listening at all. Job knew that silence. Job, who had lost his children, his wealth, his health, his standing, sat in the ash heap for chapter after chapter and cried out to God. And God was quiet. His friends filled the silence with explanations. You must have done something wrong, they said. God must be punishing you. Suffering this severe must have a cause in you. And Job said, No, I will not accept that. And he kept crying out into the silence. 37 chapters of silence from God, and then God spoke, not to explain, not to apologize, not to give Job the theological answer he had been demanding. God spoke to reveal himself. Where were you, he asked, when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? And Job, broken, grieving, sitting in ash, said something extraordinary. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. The suffering did not end the silence. The silence ended an encounter. Paul had encountered God in the 3rd heaven. He had heard things no human language can contain. And then he came down. And the thorn was still there. And he prayed 3 times. And the silence stretched. And then God spoke. So here is where we are. Paul has suffered more than almost any person in the New Testament. He has been beaten, shipwrecked, stoned, left for dead. And on top of all of that, a thorn, a stake, something nameless that impales him daily. He has prayed 3 times with everything he has, and God has been quiet. And then God speaks. What he says next, 2 sentences, contains a Greek word that most English readers have never examined closely. And when you see what that word actually means, the verse you thought you knew becomes something else entirely. If this is the kind of thing that matters to you, the original languages, the history behind the text, the things that get lost in translation, make sure you are subscribed. Because we are just getting to the part that changes everything. God's answer to Paul is recorded in 9 Greek words. In English, most translations give you something like this: "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It is a beautiful sentence. You have probably heard it at a funeral. You have probably seen it on a card sent to someone in a hospital. It is the kind of verse that gets cross-stitched onto pillows and printed on bookmarks. And there is nothing wrong with that. The sentence is true. It is profound. It deserves every wall it has ever been written on. But the Greek is doing something the English cannot fully carry. Let's start with the word your translation renders as sufficient. The Greek is Arkei. It comes from the verb archeu, and here is the first thing you need to know about it. Arkei is present tense, active, indicative, which means God is not making a promise about the future. He is making a declaration about right now. Not "my grace will be sufficient when you need it." Not "my grace was sufficient in the past and will be again." My grace is present, ongoing, immediate. But that is only the beginning. The word archeo in classical Greek does not primarily mean to be enough. It means to ward off, to defend, to be a sufficient defense against an attacking force. It carries the image of a shield raised against a blow, of a bodyguard stepping between you and the thing coming for you. When Homer uses related forms of this word in the Iliad, he uses it in the context of protection, of something powerful enough to stop what is trying to get through. And this is where it gets remarkable. God is not saying to Paul, "I will give you just enough grace to survive the thorn." He is saying, "I am actively, right now, standing between you and the full weight of what the thorn could do to you. My grace is your defense. Not a supply, a shield, not a ration of comfort dispensed when you run low. A living, present-tense force field between you and destruction." The Stoic philosophers, men like Marcus Aurelius, ideas documented by Plutarch, had a concept called Autarkeia, self-sufficiency. The ideal Stoic man needed nothing from outside himself. He was his own resource, his own fortress. Self-contained, unshakable by circumstance because he had cultivated enough inner strength to need nothing external. Paul had been a Pharisee. He knew the Greek philosophical tradition. He knew what autarkeia meant. And in Philippians chapter 4, he uses the same root word. He says he has learned to be autarkes, content, in all circumstances. But notice, he learned it. It was not natural to him. It cost him something. And crucially, it was not self-generated. "I can do all things," he writes, "through Christ who strengthens me." It is not self-sufficiency. It is God-Sufficiency. The supply comes from outside, from above, from a source that does not run dry because the source is not him. Arkei. Not autarkeia, not self-defense. God-defense. Now, look at the second half of the sentence. My power is made perfect in weakness. The word for power is dunamis. You have heard this before. It is the root of the word dynamite. It is the word used in Acts chapter 1 when Jesus tells his disciples they will receive dunamis when the Holy Spirit comes upon them. It is explosive, generative power, not the quiet power of endurance. The active power of transformation, and it is made perfect. The Greek is Teleitai, present passive, in weakness. Stay with me here. Because Teleitai is not a random word choice. It is the same root as Tetelestai, the word Jesus cries from the cross in John chapter 19. It is finished. Completed. Done. The debt cancelled. The work accomplished. Tetelestai. And here, God uses the same root word in a different form. My power keeps being completed, keeps being brought to its full expression, keeps arriving at its fullest possible state. Not once. Not in a single dramatic moment, but ongoing. Present tense, in the exact location of your weakness. John Chrysostom, the 4th century bishop, who preached through Paul's letters with a precision that has never been surpassed, wrote this about the thorn. God, like a skilled physician, did not remove it. Because a skilled physician does not always give the patient what the patient asks for. He gives what the patient needs. Chrysostom saw clearly what we miss when we read this verse as a promise of comfortable sufficiency. God is not trying to make Paul comfortable. God is trying to make Paul capable of something that comfort alone could never produce. The thorn is not the problem. The thorn is the location. The weakness is not the obstacle. The weakness is the entry point. This is conviction in the oldest sense of the word. Not guilt, but the landing of a truth so precise it finds the exact place in you where you have been wrong. Because most of us have spent years treating our weakness as the thing we must overcome before God can use us, before we are ready, before we are strong enough, healed enough, put together enough to be of any value to anyone. Paul says the opposite. Paul says weakness is not the absence of power. Weakness is the condition under which God's power stops being theoretical and becomes actual, stops being a doctrine you believe and becomes a force you experience. Your weakness is not disqualifying you. It is qualifying the grace. On a July afternoon in 1967, a 17-year-old girl named Joni Eareckson dove into the Chesapeake Bay. The water was 4 feet deep. She hit the bottom head first. Her spine snapped at the 4th and 5th cervical vertebrae. When her sister pulled her to the surface, Joni could not move her arms. She could not move her legs. She was breathing, but she could not feel anything below her shoulders. And she would never feel it again. She was 17 years old. She had her whole life in front of her. And in the space of one shallow dive, everything she had assumed about that life. The horses she loved to ride, the art she made with her hands, the future she had imagined, was gone. She spent 2 years in rehabilitation hospitals, and in those 2 years, in the darkness of wards that smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation, she prayed. She prayed the way Paul prayed. Specifically. Repeatedly. With everything she had, she asked God to heal her. She asked in faith. She asked with the full weight of a young person who still believes that if you pray hard enough and mean it enough, God will move. God did not heal her. She has spoken about this publicly for more than 50 years. She has sat in a wheelchair in front of thousands of people and told them the truth. The prayer was real, the faith was real, the silence was real. And the wheelchair is still real. Joni Eareckson Tada has never stood up and walked. The thorn was not removed. But here is what she has also said. And this is the part that costs something to hear. She has said she would not trade it. Not because the suffering was small, not because the loss was manageable, not because she found a way to make peace with it by looking on the bright side, but because what God did iron the wheelchair. The art she learned to paint holding a brush in her teeth, the ministry that has reached millions of disabled people around the world, the depth of encounter with God that she says simply could not have come any other way. She would not trade any of it for the version of her life where she walked out of that water unharmed. Arkei, not was sufficient. Not will be sufficient. Is, present tense, right now, in the exact location of the thing that did not get fixed. And here is where the Greek word lands. Not in a seminary classroom, not in a commentary, but in the place where you actually live. It is 3 a.m. You have been lying in the dark for an hour. The thing you prayed about last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, is still there. Still the same. The marriage is still cold. The diagnosis did not change. The person you love is still not back. The depression lifted for a while, and then it came back, and you are so tired of starting over that the tiredness itself has become a kind of weight you carry everywhere. And you have prayed. You have prayed the way Paul prayed. Not casually, not as a formality, but with everything in you. 3 times, 30 times, 300 times. And the ceiling has not moved. Here is what I want you to hear. The silence is not abandonment. The unanswered prayer is not evidence that nobody is listening. The thorn still being there is not proof that the grace ran out. Arkei is present tense, which means the grace is not coming. It is already here. Right now. In this room, in this moment, in the exact location of the thing that has not changed. God is not waiting for you to reach a level of faith that unlocks the supply. He is already standing between you and the full weight of what this could do to you. You are still here. You are still breathing. You are still reading these words. And that is not. That is Arkei. Active. Ongoing. Present. Paul did not just endure the thorn, he boasted in it. Not because suffering is good, not because pain is to be celebrated, but because he had understood something that takes most of us decades to learn. That weakness is not the place where God's power is absent. Weakness is the place where God's power stops being invisible. The thorn did not leave, but something moved in Paul that day that no healing could have produced. He had prayed 3 times for the thorn to go. God answered once. And the one answer was worth more than the 3 requests. He said, "My grace, not a grace, not grace in general. My grace. Personal. Directed. Specifically at you. Is. Right now. Sufficient. Defending you. Warding off the full weight of this. Being your shield. For you. Not for someone with more faith. Not for someone with a better track record. For you. As you are. In this. So let me leave you with 3 things. The first is this. Arkei is not a promise about the future. It is a declaration about the present. When God says, "My grace is sufficient," He is not telling you that one day, when things get hard enough, He will send reinforcements. He is telling you that the reinforcements are already there. Present tense. Active. Right now. Whatever you are carrying today. The grace is not on its way. It has already arrived. The second is harder. You may not need the thorn removed. You may need to know what is in the thorn with you. Paul prayed 3 times for removal. God answered with presence. And Paul, the man who had been to the 3rd heaven and back, who had heard things no human language contains, said that the presence was enough, more than enough, that in the weakness, the power of Christ rested on him. The Greek word for rested there is episkonosai. It means to pitch a tent, to take up dwelling. The same word family used in John chapter 1, when the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God does not visit your weakness. He moves in. The third. And this is the one I want you to carry. The same God who said it is finished on a Friday is the same God who says my grace is. Present tense. On whatever day this is for you, Teleitai and Arkei come from the same place, the same mouth, the same love. The work of the cross was completed once. The grace of the cross is completing itself right now, in you, through you, in the exact location of the thing that has not healed. The thorn is still in Paul when he finishes the letter. He seals it. He sends it. And then he gets up, hurting, impaled, insufficient on his own. And he goes to plant another church. Not despite the thorn. Through it. Have you ever prayed for something 3 times? And God said no, but stayed? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. And if this kind of close reading of Scripture, the original languages, the history, the things lost in translation, is the kind of thing that matters to you, there is more of it here. Stay close.